Bryce Cherryholmes is our guest this week. Bryce is a retired staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, a husband and father of two, an ambassador for the national nonprofit SoldierStrong, and an advocate for people who are experiencing debilitating physical and mental injuries. He served in Iraq and Afghanistan, where he sustained several injuries during 8 years of multiple deployments. Those injuries led to a 4-level spinal fusion, and ultimately left him as a T3 complete paraplegic. With the help of a robotic exoskeleton, Bryce has reaped the physical and emotional benefits of being able to stand, walk, and enjoy everyday activities. Bryce Cherryholmes, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Chris, thank you very much for having me.
It's good having you today, brother. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
So let's just start off, Bryce. Why'd you choose to serve in the military?
Well, to be honest with you, my grandmother, just before she passed, one of her things that she mentioned to me was she said, what you're doing right now is good. I was on the right path of working 2 jobs and just doing a lot, but she's like, you need a career. And you're 18, you need a career. You're not planning on going to college at the time anymore. She's like, go join the military. And it kind of resonated with me. And, at that point I was just like, okay, well then that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go join. And that was really about it. I just spur of the moment thing. I was actually at a job one night where I was working as security, and where I actually met my wife at. And I happened to see a former Marine in a pair of camouflage utility pants, cut off, and was like, hey, like, what branch were you in? Talk to him. He's like, here, call this guy. And I literally was at boot camp less than about a month later.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, just, hey, get me out of here as fast as you can, because I need to go.
When men and women join the military, they can choose an MOS, or a military occupational specialty. And that's what we civilians call simply a job.
Right.
What MOS did you choose and why?
That's a common misconception, actually. So you don't really get to choose necessarily your MOS. There's certain quotas that they have, for how the military, what branch, what they need, so on and so forth. And so, if they need someone that's, 6'2", and then, a lean, mean, green fighting machine, but they can play the trumpet, well, they might go to the Marine Corps band, right? So they might need that person to go do that job. My job, I went in and I specifically said, I don't want to be in infantry. Not that I was afraid to be infantry. It was just, I don't want to be in infantry, because my grandmother had said, you need a career. Well, thinking about it in the long-term effect, being in the infantry, it will teach me a lot of things, but it doesn't give me a skill set that I felt would be beneficial to a future career. So I looked at how the job market was at the time, what was going to be needed over the next decade, and logisticians was one of them. So I said, I want to go into logistics, and that's what I wanted to do. But logistics inside the Marine Corps is kind of different. You have a plans and an operations side of it, and then they merge eventually, and you have the overarching in charge of everything, both plans, operations, and the supply chain side. So that's where I ended up at, was in that overarching area when I got retired. But that's why I chose, I ended up going in there going like, listen, like, this is, I want a career, and logistics is supposed to grow tenfold over the next decade. I think, a random number off the top of my head right then and there. So it was like, well, that's what I want to do. And the guy was like, cool. When do you want to leave? I'm like, tomorrow sounds like a good time.
So perfect segue. When you're in the Marines or another service branch, do you have a choice of where or when you're deployed? Can you turn down a deployment or volunteer for one?
Yeah. So I went to boot camp in July. I don't remember the date that I got there, but I went there in July of 2007. I graduated October 19th, 2007. Graduated school in February of 2000 and went to MCT, Marine Combat Training, which is at that time was only I think 30 days, and then went to school, and that was I think 30 or 45 days. But I got out of there around February, March of 09 or of 08, sorry, 2008, and almost immediately upon arriving, they were like, "Hey, we need people to go on a deployment," and I went, "Boom, I'll go. Pick me, pick me. Ooh, ooh." I did that because it was like that is the reason why I'm gonna reposition, but that's the reason why I raised my right hand to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, right? And continuing on with that, but that's the reason when I did that knowing that I was going to go. Well, if I'm going to go, I'd rather have that choice to say, yeah, I want to go. But you do have a chance to volunteer, like I did. And then while out, and that was when I deployed to Iraq. I deployed in August of 2008, and then about 3/4 of the way through that deployment, so around December, they were like, "Hey, does anybody want to volunteer to stay another 6 months?" And I raised my hand and volunteered to stay in Iraq for an additional 6 months. Um, so, but you also have a chance to, you somewhat have a chance to deny it, but it is very specific to situations. So typically you don't have that chance, but situation dependent, like if you have family issues that are going on, say, wife might be pregnant, like my wife was pregnant when I raised my hand again to go to Afghanistan, and we had our baby before, we had our daughter before I deployed, but they were like, hey, look, you can stay behind. I was like, again, I raised my right hand to do just this, so I'm gonna go. And at that point, though, in my career, I'd already been very well versed in logistics, and I knew that if I went, I was going to ensure that every person that was out there that was infantry or was out there engaged in combat continuously, that I was going to take care of them, you know, by all means necessary, whatever that took, making sure they had absolutely everything they needed in order to accomplish their mission. And then on top of that, I always went out of my above and beyond, out of my way to like make friends where you can make friends at, without going into too many details, and have maybe some people donate some things, and then send those out to like some of the most austere locations where the Marines didn't get a chance at those locations to have a chance
Certain
to have like
luxuries.
yeah, they didn't get a chance to have like a monster, or nicotine necessarily, because it was rare that they would get mail on time, and it was rare that the teams that would go out to these places they wouldn't make regular trips because it's a lot. So I would just make sure that, like, hey, can I get 3 or 4 pallets of monsters, and a bunch of these what we call licky and chewies, like just a bunch of snack items. And I would get a head count at these locations, and I'd put them all in, myself. I'd go out, put them all inside tri walls, which are just little boxes, and either I would airdrop them or fly them right out to that place and let the helicopter land, push them off, and take off, because those austere locations are the ones that are usually the most they're
Dangerous.
the yeah, the most dangerous. Yeah.
So I'm just showing my age here for a minute. I know you're way too young to have seen this show called
Yeah.
MASH.
Mm,
But you sound like you're a bit of a Radar O'Reilly clinger here in terms of doing some horse trading to take care of your Marines. So I'd love to hear
that
that.
that's absolutely correct. I'm not too young, Chris. I'm not too young. I have seen that show. Yes, sir. Uh, but yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, what it comes down to is, I learned very early on in my career in the Marine Corps that it's not necessarily what you know, but who you know, and that you can make those sort of deals happen. And with those deals being made, you're able to take care of the many. And unfortunately, a lot of people focus internally on themselves, where I, even now, I try to stay as humble as I can, and I focus on, I won't give you this sweatshirt, Chris, because it's, it says it's my disabled but deadly wheelchair with a rifle in my hand. Um, but I would give you the other one that I have, because I have to keep one. I like this color better. So
Looks better on you anyway.
yeah, appreciate it.
So very few Americans these days know someone who serves in the military, and of course, even fewer have served in the military themselves.
Yeah.
How is military service different than civilian life for the people who serve and for their families?
A very good question on that one, actually. Yeah, I think that the statistics say is it's like less than 1% of the United States population has served in the military in some aspect, whether on active duty or in a reserve capacity, or even National Guard. Um, and then on top of that, there's even, less than 1% of those are Marines as well. So because we're one of the smallest branches. Um, and we're really not even a branch. We're a department of the Navy. And I'll uh I'll make a quick jab here at my fellow service members, but we're the department of the Navy, but we're the men's department of the Navy. Um,
I've never heard that before.
yes, yes, we are a department of the Navy. All our funding comes from the Navy, but we happen to be the men's department of the Navy. So I have a lot of friends that are still in the Navy. A lot of them are chiefs now. One of them I grew up with, very, very close high school friend of mine. I won't say his last name, but his first name is Jake. And I don't want to put him on blast and have him get in trouble. But how I guess it differs, back to your question, is how it differs is it's kinetic. It's very kinetic in a military family. You have to be fluid. You really do. If you're not able to be fluid and be willing to move at a moment's notice, there's a lot of times that I had, we would do these, preparation deployment, preparation for deployment, where we'd be on a 24-hour standby. And so, it's my wife knew that, like, hey, within these next 24 to 72 hours, I could be going here, because that was where the conflict was at the time, right? Like, I could be going there. A lot of them were training and drills, obviously. Everyone that I ever did was, but they're still there. So you have to be very kinetic. It's a kinetic environment. Whereas after I got out in the civilian world, it it's it's more of a day-to-day operation. You just get up, you go to work, you come home, do what you need to do, get up, go to bed, get up, go to work again. Same. So whereas there it was, it's a salaried position, if you want to call it, inside the military. Um, uh, but you're on duty 7 days a week, 365 days a year, no matter what. So unless you're on leave, and even then you can get pulled off. So like, hey, you got to come back because we're deploying. It's like, oh, all right, that happened to me once. So I was like, oh, all right, well, I'll be on my way back shortly.
So you raised your right hand to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Yes,
You
sir.
raised your hand 7 more times for a total of 8 deployments. You were a young man when you were deployed to a war zone. How did that first deployment affect your mental and emotional well-being and that of the other people you served with?
I would say, just real quick on the first note, not a total of 8. Um, you could count them that way only due to the time frames and how the phases played out within OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and OEF, Operation Enduring Freedom. And then with my deployment to Central South America as well as Haiti. So in total, I deployed technically 3 times, but the way the Marine Corps counts it, it's right around that mark that you just mentioned. But and I'm sorry, I was focused on that part of that question. I wanted to make sure I got that correct. But what was the second
What's
part of
what's
that?
your mental and emotional well-being, as a young man, your first deployment? What's going through your head when you get
Oh,
boots on the ground?
literally. I made sure I was the last person to get onto that plane. Um, and I did that for a reason. I said, you know, I want to be the last person on because I want to be the last person off. And the whole time there, you know, I spoke to God and I said, basically like, if you allow me to have control of the situation, I'll have control of it and I'll do my best. And if it's my time to go, then it's my time to go, and I leave that in your hands. But if I have no control over that situation, I leave it completely into you, Lord. Like that's it. Uh, and as soon as I got boots on ground in Kuwait, it's where we staged before we flew into Iraq. It was August 11th of 2009. We landed in Kuwait August 13th, and I'll tell you what, I thought North Carolina, where I live now, was hot and humid. We landed at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and you get off a plane that you've been on for like almost 18 hours, and that the 2 o'clock in the morning, it was still like 110 degrees outside. Took your breath away as soon as you walked out the doors. Is there oxygen here? How do people live? But that's kind of my like emotional state, I guess. I just kind of literally left it up to God's hands, and my mentality of it as well was just, if I can control it, I'm gonna do it. If I can't, there's nothing I can do about it, and I understood that concept. So for me, it wasn't that challenging. For others, though, I witnessed them go through a myriad of their own trials and tribulations as they were getting ready to deploy, getting ready to get on the plane, stopping in these certain countries that we stop at before to refuel and refit, if you will, and watching how some of them just break down. Some of them weren't ready. Some mentally they weren't ready. Emotionally they weren't ready. Physically they were there. Mentally they were there. They just didn't know it. They didn't know it because of the way we're trained. It's muscle memory. So everything just happens so fast once you start getting in any type of situation you've been trained for, and even ones that you haven't, that you're just reacting without even realizing that you're reacting, until maybe even days later. So for me, it wasn't challenging. I would say I literally left it into God's hands.
You sustained several injuries during your years of service in both Iraq and Afghanistan that caused severe and ultimately debilitating pain. How those injuries happen, and describe the pain you were coping with.
So the first injury happened in March of 2009, and I was filling up a water bowl, what we call. It's not very big, but it's a water trailer. And we had the TCN, or what's called the third country national. That's over there, and I'm holding on to this hose that's filling our 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 water trailer with potable water for us, because we were going on a 5-day mission. And I gave him the international, like, shut it off sign, like, or the international, like, stop. And I even yelled stop, like, to stop the flow of water because it was getting full. I had my flak jacket on, full kit gear, weapon, Kevlar. Unfortunately, my Kevlar at that time, I didn't have it on my head because we were still on base. So I just had it clipped onto my flak jacket because it's, hot in Iraq. So, um, some breeze felt good, but and like I said, 180 rounds of ammunition, a couple other, gizmos and gadgets with me, and he didn't shut it off. And so when it overflowed, I started to slip. And it's about 6-7 foot in the air, maybe a little bit higher, probably about closer to 7 and 8 foot in the air. But I'm 6'3" 3/4. So, and at that time I weighed about 180 pounds. And but with all my kit on, I was probably closer to 225. As I started to slip, I pushed away from the water bowl, from the water trailer. I landed flat-footed, knees locked. I ruptured 2 discs in my lower back and herniated another one. But when I did that, I also rolled my right ankle and I kind of fell backwards. And when I fell backwards, I got my, actually, I can't remember if it was my first or second TBI. I think it was my second TBI. Because I hit my head on the back of the water trailer, and I hit the back of my head on the water trailer and knocked myself unconscious. And I didn't know what was going on until I was already at the regimental aid station and they were triaging me. Um, and they, a lot of times they were just like, hey, this is pretty bad. We don't know what we're gonna do yet. And I was like, well, listen, like I raised my hand to stay and volunteer. And, at that time when you volunteer to stay somewhere, it's not necessarily in your job. It's wherever they need help at and within that, that area of operation. So you fill just a regular any billet that's possible. So I worked for the PX, or the like the Walmart, I guess you would, of the military. And so my
In the
job
men's
was,
department, right?
yes, yes, yes. um, only the men's department there. But so uh, I let them know. I'm like, yeah, I'm in a lot of pain. They're like, well, uh, here's some Motrin. Make sure you drink some water. And the other jokes we have about it is we always say that make sure you drink water, change your socks, take a shower. You'll be okay. Here's some ibuprofen. All was good though. Like it. I was young, I was dumb, but I was still full of piss and vinegar, if you will, and I was still willing and ready to fight. So I convinced the individuals there to let me stay, and I went and saw them regularly. um and that was a good thing. I dealt, that's when the pain really kind of started, but it kind of sucked too because I had to stop weightlifting. I couldn't do deadlifts anymore. um but yeah, after that, it was May of the same year, um on a small patrol out to a little area where we were going to just do what's called a West team. And on the way out, a vehicle in front of us, their mine roller hit a IED. Luckily, it wasn't a very large one. And then their mine roller took the brunt of it, which is a big, heavy piece of equipment with a lot of wheels in front of it that basically put a lot of pressure on the ground for pressure plate IEDs. And well, when they stopped, we stopped. But when you have, a couple ton of vehicle and the driver hits the brakes, um, however fast you were going, it's kind of like if the earth stopped spinning. I think we spent like 1,700 miles an hour or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but whatever it is, like as soon as it stops, everything keeps going, right? So I got tossed around in the back of this MRAP and messed up my back some more. But again, I was still willing and able to fight. Just had to convince them to let me stay until August, and so that's what I did. I had just come back from R&R too, rest and relaxation. You get 2 weeks if you spend more than however long out there. So you get 2 weeks. They send you wherever you want to go. I came back to Iowa. Won't forget that either, because I got off the plane in Iowa and they had just cut the grass, and I stopped in the middle of the street and just, there's a smell of grass. There's not sand in my nose. Like, it was incredible.
How does that level of pain affect your attitude, your mental health, and your interaction with other people?
My interaction with other people, that part of it, I didn't let that pain have an impact on that. I really didn't. I internalized it, every bit of it. So mentally on that aspect also, I just internalized it. I told myself, I mean, when I got back home from that deployment, I went through the physical therapy, I went through the motions that they tell you that you need to do. Um, and that was it. I when I went through all those, you know, the motions, if you will, I said, hey, you know, let's just keep, like, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Like, I did more physical therapy. What else is next for pain management? By about that time though, you know, when I got back from Iraq in 2009, August, my wife and I got married in in
You better know the date.
Thank
She's listening.
no, yeah, I know. November, no, November 26th, 2009, Thanksgiving Day. Um, it was when the marriage certificate was signed, at least. But yeah, so we got married in November of that year, and then we had a wedding that was planned for May of the next year. And in 2010, eh, on my way to our wedding, I got a phone call that was like, "Hey, uh, you've been by name requested to come on this deployment on ship to Central and South America." And I was like, I'm going back to my wedding right now. I don't know what to do with my hands. I don't know, what can I say?" And they're like, you kind of need it. And I'm like, all right, fine. So I took off. You know, we got home. I got there, did the quick wedding ceremony. Yes, I do. She did, and you know, I do. Exchanged rings. Got back, left end of June of that year. So, and then I got back literally the day before our 1 year technical marriage anniversary. So, ah, it it was challenging, but that deployment was difficult too because I was on ship and steel decks, steel floors. They don't actually give a lot. I think concrete gives more than they did, so it actually hurt my back quite a bit, which was ironic because the gunnery sergeant who was in charge of me at the time, I was a corporal. He ended up getting medevaced for a back injury that he had, and I ended up taking his place as the combat cargo assistant chief for the well deck, and not really taking his place. I was more overseeing than anything else, but the command I was with, they trusted me. They knew I knew what I was doing. So I say I took his place. He might beg to differ. Gunny, I apologize. Um, but you know, that during that deployment, there's videos on YouTube. It's called CP, so Charlie Papa -10 Continuing Promise 2010. We were the second ones to go to Haiti to do humanitarian assistance missions. And then we went around to Central and South America doing the same stuff. And but I was lifting up trailers, right? Like picking up the tongue of a trailer, and you don't realize how much pressure that puts on your lower back until, you know, probably the 100th one that's not light. And you had to walk them over what they call the pad eyes, which kind of look like a plus sign or a crosshair on the deck of the ship, so that the tongue didn't get stuck in them. So I ended up hurt too, but again, I was, I don't know, 22, I guess, at that time, still young and dumb. So I just stayed in the fight and kept on keeping on. So
So, at what point did you, or was it your doctors, decide that you should have spinal surgery?
so I deployed to Afghanistan in 2012 in January and came back, I think, September of that year. Um, I got hurt again over there as well, but um, longer story shorter, I guess. I re-injured my back again over there. And when I got back, when I left, you know, I told you before we went to Afghanistan in October of 2011, we had our first child. We had our daughter, and I left, and she, you know, her head would fit in the palm of my hand, and her butt crack was at my elbow joint. When I came back, she was walking to me, so I missed out a bunch on her growing up in her, you know, first part of her life. And couple months went by, and I want to say 2013, I went to sergeant's course for professional military education. And at sergeant's course in Camp Pendleton, you know, you run the mountains, if you will. And so up a mountain, but the back down is up the mountain wasn't hard to run. Down was the more challenging one, especially being as tall as I am. You know, I tended to stride out, so it's impact on that back all the time. And that's when I started having like really bad chronic pain and weird tingling sensations and a lot of what's called radiculopathy, which is, nerve, like your burning of your nerves, where it just feels like your legs on fire, your buttocks is on fire. After I finished that course, I was walking up the stairs of our house at the time with my daughter in my hands and her arms, and something happened. I tweaked it the wrong way, I guess, and I kind of collapsed a little bit, if you will, like my legs kind of gave out. I just quickly tossed her up onto the platform as I tumbled and rolled back down the stairs. After that, immediately we went to the doctor, to the, battalion aid station. They took x-rays. They referred me to pain management. I went through that process again. And then pain management said, look, you need to go see a neurosurgeon. I went and saw him, and he had already done an MRI, and the first, more or less, first words out of his mouth were, there's one thing. There's only one that might have a chance of helping you get out of this pain and getting you back to normal, and that's a 4-level spinal fusion. And I said, well, what are the odds? He's 50-50. It's 50% chance you're going to be better and a 50% chance you're either going to be the same or worse, pain-wise. So it took a couple months. My wife and I talked about it, and eventually we decided that's what I needed to do. I couldn't sleep at night in a bed, so like there's probably 6 months that went by that I couldn't sleep next to my wife in bed. I had to sleep on. We had a slate coffee table, and I would sleep on that coffee table because even the carpet floor was too soft, and I'd wake up just sore all the time throughout the night. So we went through that process, and then I said, let's go do it. April 1st, 2014, I had the 4-level spinal fusion. I'll never forget the day because it's April Fool's Day, and I looked at the surgeon and I said, if you're messing with me, I'm gonna whoop you. But when I woke up, immediately once I woke up, I was coming out of anesthetic, and I said, it didn't work. Like I already could tell just from the pain that I was in, and with the medication I was on, I shouldn't have been in any pain, but I was in a lot of pain. So I was like, something's not right, and about the year that followed after that, went through a lot of different treatment modalities to figure out what was kind of going on and see if we can help me in any way, and nothing worked. I ended up just basically on high dose opiates, and that just more or less took the edge off. So you get build a tolerance to those really quick. So
And that led to another surgery?
that led to a medical retirement, which after I got retired, that led to another surgery. That surgery that I had, unfortunately, there was malpractice involved, and that ended up waking up from that surgery. I left that surgery center in a different state, and got back to the hotel room. Everything seemed to be all right, and a couple hours went by, and I felt like I had to urinate. Asked the person who was with me that had signed off on treatment and care for me after the fact, to watch out for X, Y, and Z symptoms, because again, I came out of anesthesia, so I wasn't able to sign that for myself, and I wasn't aware of a lot of these symptoms and stuff that you should look out for. But I went to urinate. I had to get help into the bathroom to urinate. I tried as I was holding on to the gentleman. I was trying to urinate, and when I went to push, my legs collapsed, my core collapsed, and I just kind of fell onto the toilet. Really awkward too, because I always take my hand, and I know your listeners can't see me, but I've done it as a comfort thing since I was a young kid. I always take my hand and rub my leg with it, just as like a reassuring thing. Well, I did that, and I realized at that point that I could feel my leg with my hand, but I couldn't feel my hand on my leg. And I'm like, so then I tried to move them, and yeah, it didn't work. The individual asked, like, well, what do you want me to do? I told him I can't feel my legs, I can't move them. What do you want me to do? I said, call 911. And unfortunately, that didn't happen right away, and my phone wasn't near me. And I'll never forget that day, because that was the first day in my life I ever watched as I was being pulled back in a desk chair from the restroom to the bed. My legs just bounced across the floor uncontrollably, like I had no control. And even then, like I wasn't worried, I always, like I said, I left it into God's hands. So I really wasn't that worried about what was happening. I really didn't know what was happening either. And I didn't know until, maybe an hour and a half later, when he finally did call 911. And as soon as the basic paramedics showed up, they called advanced life support, because I was already, Marine Corps teaches you a lot for triage, right? They teach you how to triage for shock and things like that. But if you ever apply a tourniquet to someone, they tell you to write, T for the tourniquet, and then you write the time and the date that it was applied on the person's forehead. So I took that and I made it my own, and I took a pen and I would draw on my body where I was losing some, where I couldn't feel anymore, and I'd write the time. And I kept doing that, and that's when ALS showed up. They were like, "Nope, time to go." Care flighted me to a shock trauma center, and I underwent immediate emergent surgery to correct the issue, or hopefully correct it. But unfortunately, I had a 150 cc blood clot from T6 to T10, and I had blood clots from T1 all the way to L1. And the biggest one, the 150 cc one, compressed on my spinal cord for so long that it was basically congealed when they got to it. And like jelly is how the doctor described it. And flattened my spinal cord, cut off blood supply, and so on and so forth. So that left me as a T3, what's called an Asia or American Spinal Injury Association A. So no movement or sensation beneath the level of injury against gravity, and a complete paraplegic, which I didn't realize that till like 3 years after the fact, but that just means that you lost rectal tone. So if you were to do what's called digital stimulation, like I have to do, kind of TMI for your listeners, but digital stimulation, where you have to insert a finger into your anus, not the planet, but the other spot, and and stimulate your bowels so that you can actually, go to the bathroom. Because I don't know when I have to take a number 1 or number 2. So, but that's when that happened. I even in the shock trauma center, I was thinking to myself, like, you know, uh, I'm gonna get through it. Like, whatever he's put in my way, he's done it for a reason. God has done it for a reason. So I'm gonna find the reason why. And that's that's my outlook on it. I always kept a smile on my face no matter what. I wear a lot of masks to hide that mental anguish and the pain that I suffer and deal with daily, but I do it because I don't want others to see that in me. Um, but
And
at the
that,
same time, go ahead.
no, I'm saying that leads to your resiliency.
Yeah,
And resilience is defined as the ability to cope with setbacks.
right.
In your mind, why is resilience an important skill to cultivate?
Cultivate is a very, very strong word in that question. To me, cultivate means to grow or to establish, right? And resiliency, the way you define it is perfect. But in order to maintain that is difficult. Um, it's very important to cultivate your resilience. or the ability to have resilience and fortitude to continue on. Because for me, and me personally, I have 2 young kids. They're 11 and 9 now. My son was 2, turned 3, 11 days after I got paralyzed. He doesn't remember dad playing kickball with him. He doesn't remember dad taking him on bike rides, in the recumbent trike. Uh, he doesn't remember a lot of those things. My daughter was 5 at the time, just turned. She doesn't remember a lot of those things. And unfortunately for me, resiliency, well, fortunately, not unfortunately, I'll say, fortunately, resiliency means I get to teach them that no matter what, obstacles or adversities that you face, you need to find a way to get over them, get past them. I don't care if you have to do what I just did and build a bridge to get over it. Um, if you need to dig a tunnel to get under it, I don't find a way around it, and just make sure that you stay on path. So to me, that's how I would say that resiliency is important to cultivate. It's not just for me. It helps strengthen me, but it's more for my children and their future lives. So
Well, and to that point, I know that you focus on what you can do rather than what you can't do, but you're also a realist. You certainly don't sugarcoat things, and you tell it exactly like it is, whether we want to hear it or not. I've known you long enough
that's
so I can say
correct.
that.
Yes, sir.
How has your paralysis changed the way that you parent your 2 kids? What can you do, maybe even that surprised you, and what can't you do right now?
Well, I can't run after them. So if they take off, they win for a little bit, but they always got they've been told, I know where you sleep, so it's okay. But how is it? Has it changed how I parent them? It really hasn't. Um, you again the Marine Corps, we have a motto of adapt and overcome. So I think that's all military branches too, but I can only speak of the Marines. So I adapt my parenting style to fit the the situation at the time. Um, Whereas before I might have been able to physically go over and reach up on the top shelf and unplug the TV or something, right? Like, no, you didn't get to watch it no more. Now it's more like I'm just gonna take the remotes because you can't reach the top shelf with the TV set. So um, it also at the same time it's like, hey, you guys you're just gonna go outside. We're gonna go outside right now. We're gonna go play catch. We're gonna go do this. We're gonna do that. We're gonna try. And they'll say, but ball goes past you. I'm like, that's good. That means you missed the throw. So you need to be more accurate. And I make them go get the ball. It's give and take, I believe, in that aspect.
I know you as someone who is almost always upbeat, but you've faced mental health challenges and struggles of your own. As anyone would who's gone through the things that you've gone through with your life and your career, and then suddenly you couldn't do them. How has your resilience protected you from mental health issues such as depression?
It hasn't, to be honest. And I mean, you know me well enough, Chris. It definitely hasn't. However, like I stated earlier, I wear a lot of masks to hide that. I deal with it constantly. The big problem with that is, um, again, I internalize a lot of it, but people have always told me that if you talk to yourself, that's not a bad thing, but when you answer yourself, that's the bad thing. Um, so I don't try to verbalize or I don't try to answer myself uh, using my actual voice. I do it inside my head instead. That way, that no one can tell me I'm crazy. Uh, but it hasn't. It's been more detrimental to my mental health than it has been positive. And I say it that way, but I even thinking about it now, I can add to it and say that it's strengthened me in the same aspect where I know what I deal with on a daily basis. And so when I meet others that are similarly injured like I am, my main goal then is to talk with them because I know that not everyone can hide it the way that I do, or not everyone can, push it down and internalize that pain that we deal with, and just that, again, that mental anguish, that heartbreak. So I try to speak with them, joke around, have a good time, and let them know that, we can do this, like, together. If you need my help, let me know. If I can be of assistance in any way, let me know. Um, and a lot of times too, like, I learn from them just as much as they may learn from me. I make sure that I learn from everyone I come across, because I believe you should learn at least something new every day, whatever it might be. Um, on that note, though, it is still very much so debilitating in the mental health aspect, where I get upset at myself. Like, this happened a little while ago. I was like, where's my phone? Like, I got this call with Chris. I know my phone's around here somewhere, and I couldn't find my phone. And I, felt in all my pockets, and I turned my watch to locate my phone. My phone was sitting on my lap, and I just didn't feel it. And it's like, well, I hate that. Like, I hate not being able to feel. Like, that part sucks. Um, but right now, that's life. So I accept that. I think you have to, especially, I mean, I wasn't like this the whole time. It took me a couple years to end up the way that I am now, how I look at life. And that's it's kind of that in a nutshell. I mean, the first 2 years I barely got out of bed, barely did anything, and because I didn't think I could. And it wasn't until I started to actually push myself and try to do more, and I could see how my depression was, impacting my children and my wife, my family, um, and not wearing by not, necessarily wearing those masks or being resilient. Um, I decided at that point that, it's time to shape up. I gotta change, and that's when okay, like, I'm gonna figure out a way to do everything that, I can possibly do. And if I can't do it and I failed, that doesn't mean I failed at doing it. It just means that I found a way that didn't work. So I go back to, like, Thomas Edison, or umpteen times he failed on making a light bulb, and okay, but all he did was find, umpteen times ways it didn't work, until he finally found the one that did. So that's kind of how I look at it, right? I mean, that's the best way to, I think, articulate it, is you can fail and fail and fail as much as you want, but if you give up, that's when you lost the battle with yourself. And when you lose that battle with yourself, that's when you've lost the war. So, it's there was a thing on, ironically, you do know me very well. There was a thing on Facebook the other day. Barely get on social media much anymore. I'm just try to stay too active, too busy. But Matthew McConaughey said something like, don't half-ass it. Like, don't half-ass it. Ain't that something? Like, we say it a lot, but, like, if you half-ass something, you know that, or sorry, if you half-ass something, you don't know what it could have been. And so, what if you would have done it and did your best and tried as hard as you could to do it, you don't know if at the end of the day what the outcome would have been, and that's what keeps you up at night. And so I do my best not to half-ass things. If I'm going to do it, I try to do it right the first time, and if I can't do it right the first time, I continue to try until I find a way to do it. So
Well, that's a great way to put it. One thing I know that you definitely do not half-ass is support causes that are important to you.
that is correct. Yes, sir.
And one cause that you've recently become involved in is speaking out against legislative efforts in some states that limit the non-economic damages that people receive from medical malpractice judgments or settlements. Why does that matter to you?
non-economic damages, a lot of times are just defined as pain and suffering. Unfortunately, that's not all of it. And you know, when I was going through the malpractice issues that I was dealing with, there was a cap on non-economic damages in the state that I was in of $750,000. And if you think about it, so that doesn't, the non-economic damages don't, that's not your lost wages, right? So if you look across the United States and you see that right now in our current economy, unfortunately, people are struggling to get by. With that being said, if an 18-year-old kid, or even at the age I was, a 28-year-old individual, if they are suffering or just struggling to get by with a family, they have almost nothing for regular economic damages, for lost wages. So those damages right there, they might not get anything really for that. So then their pain and suffering, that mental anguish I was talking about that I deal with, that's I mean, non-economic damages are really defined as that they're there to compensate you for pain and suffering, for emotional distress, for loss of consortium, for your spouse, for just the inconvenience of what's going on. And then there's just any other non-punitive, non-compensatory damages. But people don't understand what pain and suffering really is. So with that being said, pain and suffering isn't just physical pain. It's mental, it's emotional. It's the fact that I can't procreate naturally with my wife, and we wanted more children. Doesn't mean I can't adopt, don't get me wrong, but we wanted our own more children. But because of this, we now have seen a difference where we like there's a lot of children out there that need help. So there's a lot of children in the United States of America that are in foster care or are up for adoption and could use a good home, and good people to raise them, right? And it just doesn't, non-economic damages don't make sense. To put a cap on someone's losses of what they're pain and suffering, what they're dealing with daily, it's where you're punishing the victim and not the perpetrator of the event. And that's my personal opinion on that. I believe there should be a common ground, but however, I don't know what that common ground is. But I just don't believe in caps on those damages.
Bryce Cherryholmes, you're one of the most positive, most resilient individuals that anyone will ever meet. I appreciate you sharing your story with us today.
Chris, I appreciate you just letting me do exactly that and share this story.
Semper
And
Fi,
thank you
brother.
to you and all of your listeners, and Semper Fidelis as well.
And thank you to our audience for joining us for another episode of Next Steps Forward. I'm Chris Meek. For more details on upcoming shows and guests, please follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Chris Meek Public Figure, and on Twitter at @ChrisMeek_USA. We'll be back next Tuesday, same time, same place, with a leader from the world of business, politics, public policy, sports, or entertainment. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.